Sooner fans, you are not used to this. We will see what the rest of the season holds as Oklahoma looks to improve coming off a devastating loss to Texas. We got Parker Thune, of course, on the line from KREF Sports. That is your stop every Monday through Friday at noon Central Time. OU Insider as well. Parker, how are you doing today?
Well, Mark, I'm doing great. I tell you, the vibe around the Sooner State could certainly be better right now. Losing 2 of 3 games to Texas in blowout fashion to kick off the Brent Venables era is not necessarily what this fan base had in mind.
Yeah, and being just a 1-point favorite, 1.5-point favorite against South Carolina is probably not what they had in mind, considering that South Carolina has on occasion looked like a pretty competitive football team, most recently in Tuscaloosa. And then, of course, Oklahoma not meeting expectations or standards. So we'll jump back to Texas here real quick because the College Football Nation did not expect Oklahoma to win this football game. I and others expected it to be a much more competitive game. I don't know that the Oklahoma defense could do too much better. You can only hold up on 25-yard fields after turnovers for so long. And where that game turned into a competitive game after 1.5 quarters into a blowout was just turnover after turnover, 3 and out, 3 and out. And then the defense being put in a bad spot, and then suddenly the dam breaks and it's game over.
Yeah, it was rough to watch, Mark. Rough to watch if you're an OU football fan that was at least hoping for a competitive football game because expectations, as you mentioned, were modest. Texas was the number 1 team in the nation for a reason. And to be quite frank, there was some belief within that building, certainly, that Oklahoma could come in with a game plan to take Texas down and execute accordingly. And that's the one thing that they did not do. They did not execute at all, particularly offensively. And you're right. The defense, they did really all they could. Could they have tackled better? Absolutely. It wasn't perfect by any means, but you can only stem the tide for so long when your offense is not scoring and not sustaining drives, and you're having to trot back out there every 2-3 minutes because that's as long as your offense can stay on the field and allow you a breather. So right now, pretty much all of Oklahoma's issues are concentrated on the offensive side of the ball, which is such a weird predicament for this university and this program to be in, Mark, because for my entire lifetime, for a lot of folks' entire lifetime at this point, all they've ever known is prolific offense at Oklahoma. And if anything has been the bugaboo for the program, it's been the defense. Now in 2024, and this is where some people have a hard time processing exactly where they stand on Brent Venables as a head coach. He's done the one thing that you expected him to do. He was hired to transform the defense. That's why you bring in Brent Venables to be your head coach. That's your way of saying we are going to play championship level defense at all costs. We're going to bring in the one guy that we know can orchestrate a championship level defense. And if they're not already there, Mark, they're certainly on the cusp of being there as far as playing championship, like truly championship level defense. The issue is, for the first time in a quarter century, they can't move the ball on offense.
No, they can't. And now they get into this game with South Carolina. And this is the time of year when injury reports should be checked on every team, but especially if you're talking Oklahoma football. So Deion Burks questionable. So there is some hope that they get their arguably best wide receiver back.
Some hope, Mark. I'm not terribly optimistic. I don't expect Deion Burks to play in this football game. And if that's the case, and it may be a long day, another long day for this Oklahoma offensive attack, because Michael Hawkins is going to be dealing with the same group of wide receivers that he's had to throw to in his first 2 starts, and none of them are game changers. Some of them are good. Some of them are decent. None of them are true game changers. And moreover, the bigger issue offensively right now for Oklahoma is that the offensive line play is not where it needs to be, and that has had a direct trickle-down effect on the run game. Oklahoma cannot run the ball with any degree of consistency or effectiveness. And so you look at what South Carolina does well, and that is rush the passer. Dylan Stewart, Kyle Kennard, those guys can get after the quarterback. And so if Oklahoma is once again one-dimensional offensively on Saturday. And Michael Hawkins is having to drop back 40 times. And if you are Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks, that you can expect Michael Hawkins to be dropping back to pass on any given snap. Man, you can just pin your ears back and go and let Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard do what they do best. And so Oklahoma is going to have to run the ball effectively. They're going to have to figure it out on the ground on Saturday if they want to have a chance to hold serve on their home field. And frankly, the outlook the rest of the way, Mark, is not too rosy, because if you can't beat South Carolina, who can you beat? And that's no knock on South Carolina, but you look at Oklahoma's schedule the rest of the way, they get the SEC bye game in November against Maine. Okay, that's a win. Elsewhere, they have to play 4 of the top 15 teams in the nation among their 5 other games to close out the slate.
Yeah, this was one of those games in the offseason that you gave it the green check mark for Oklahoma in the win column, and you moved on to other SEC games. But South Carolina, aside from a 24-point blowout loss against Ole Miss, I watched the entirety of the Alabama game. I saw the LSU game, and they beat Kentucky by 25 points. They've played some pretty good football, much better football team than I anticipated, despite some of their offensive challenges. Like you say, they've got a great pass rush, and it should be maybe not 2 of the best teams in America playing, but it should be a competitive, fun game to watch.
I mean, maybe. I think it'll be a competitive game. Is it going to be a fun game to watch? I don't know, because the over-under for this game is, 41 right now? Something like that. So it may very well be a defensive stalemate, a chess match, if you will. There might not be a ton of points scored this weekend between Oklahoma and South Carolina. Could be a battle of the kickers. One way or another, this is certainly a must-win game for Oklahoma, because you have to pull a legit upset if you want to get bowl eligible, if you don't go beat South Carolina this weekend, whether that comes against Missouri or against LSU or against Alabama or against Ole Miss. Point is, you got to beat a football team that's really good somewhere along the way if you want to get to that 6-win threshold and be a bowl eligible team. And for that to be where Oklahoma sits in year 3 of the Brent Venables era is not something that anybody anticipated. And certainly injuries are to blame for part of their struggles this year, but you certainly can't pin it all on injuries either. Coaching has to get better. Execution has to get better. The best football players on Oklahoma's roster have to play like the best football players on Oklahoma's roster. And there were a lot of guys in that upper echelon last week against Texas that just did not play especially well. You did not expect to see Robert Spears-Jennings missing tackles, or Billy Bowman missing tackles, or Woody Washington getting lost out there on the perimeter. And so there are so many problems for this football team right now that have manifested. And I guess the frustrating thing is none of them are major problems. You don't look at any one of those issues in isolation and say, okay, that's going to hold a football team back. But in conjunction with so many of the other issues that have manifested elsewhere, Mark, it all adds up to what has been a very unsexy 6 weeks of football for Oklahoma and a really challenging outlook moving forward.
Parker Thune on the line with us here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video and subscribe. Of course, check out Parker's work, KREF Sports, Monday through Friday. That's noon Central to 3 p.m. and OU Insider as well. Anything in particular that you guys are working on this week?
Trying to figure out what's up with this offense, Mark. That's the only thing anybody's talking about, the only thing anybody's trying to figure out right now in Oklahoma circles. And again, you would hope, if you're an OU football fan out there that wants to see this team channel whatever magic they might have in store for the closing stretch, you'd like to see that start this weekend against South Carolina, defend your home turf, et cetera. Because to this point, the only SEC game that the Sooners have played on their home field was that 25-15 loss in Tennessee. So they have yet to win a conference game at home. We'll see. It's got to come together, and it's got to come together quickly, because you just had your bye week. You had 2 weeks to prepare for Texas, and I guess that is what makes that performance all the more alarming, is that you don't get that extra week to prepare for anybody the rest of the way. I guess you do after the Missouri game. There's a second bye, the 16th of November, but the gauntlet hits, and it hits hard from here on out.
It does. And I was going to ask you about adjusted goals, but I think you really hit on it. It's to get to postseason play. And even though a bowl game is not what it used to be, of course, it allots this team 15 more practices. And there's just a standard that shows at least you are in this group of postseason teams rather than, wow, they missed a bowl game. There's this stigma placed on that, and for good reason, that if you don't reach postseason play, then you really did not have a good season. Uh, Gentry Williams apparently not going to play.
Not going to play.
Not going to play.
Not coming back for a while.
And so we've seen some fallout, Parker, in other locations. Florida State, I think, is the best example of recruiting flips because of where the program seems to be headed. Have we started to see anything related to recruiting?
Not really. Feels like for the most part, the guys that Oklahoma has committed in the 2025 cycle are locked in come hell or high water. And, if this season really goes down the tubes, there's certainly the chance. A guy like Cortez Mills, for instance, top 100 player in the nation at the wide receiver position down in the Miami area. Oh, yeah, he'll have the Hurricanes in his ear. He'll have Florida in his ear. He'll have all the usual suspects, LSU coming after him. Like, it's a guy like that you look at and say, okay, if Oklahoma continues to tailspin, then yes, they're going to have to worry about holding on to his commitment. But there are no rumblings right now that XYZ prospect kind of has wandering eyes given Oklahoma's current struggles. All those guys are close-knit. They're together for the moment, and they're staying the course with Oklahoma. We'll see if that persists, depending on how the rest of the season goes. We'll see.
All right, Parker. I will let you be for the day and see if you guys can dig up some offense for Oklahoma in the next 3 days or so.
All right, Mark. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you being here. Thanks.